This is Open Door with Vince Robinson. In-depth conversations with people who are making a difference in the lives of others here and around the world. Culture is at the heart of who you are. Know your culture, find yourself on Open Door with Vince Robinson.
Grand Dawn and Great Rising, Cleveland, Ohio, and the rest of planet Earth. Welcome to another edition of Open Door with Vince Robinson. My guest this morning is someone that I have known for several years. Once upon a time, we were actually working at the same radio station downtown Cleveland. His life took a few different turns. My life took a few different turns. And now here we are in the same space once again. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you Mr. David L. Moody, known to me as Dave Moody. How you doing, Dave?
I'm good, Vince. Yeah, I should have bought that station we were working at and its sister, the FM WGCL, but you know how that goes.
Yeah, I know how it goes. I'm just remembering back in the day, we were in a space right across the street from the Greyhound bus station, and you were at the FM station. I was at the AM station. I was doing news, and you were in sales, and somehow you left that world. But I know that in radio, the people who make the bucks are the folks who are management and the folks who are in sales. Am I
well,
correct?
And I actually was on the AM side.
Okay.
Spent some time down on the first floor talking to the salespeople at GCL because I knew them. But no, I was started off as an account executive with WERE and ended up becoming the regional sales manager for the station. So it's just you news people lived in your own world. You just saw us passing in the hallway.
Right. Well, I got to tell you, bro, those were the days. That was when I had a job. It wasn't a really good paying job because, radio really doesn't pay a lot except for the folks who do morning drive and syndication and put so many other people out of work. But that's another subject. We won't go there. Dave, you actually grew up in Ashtabula. Can you talk about what it was like for you being a black person out there in Northeast Ohio where there weren't very many of us?
There were a few, probably more than people realized that lived in town. I think part of the thing is too, Ashtabula is kind of depicted as this small town, which it is, but it's in a rural area, and I think people often think that it's some town that's out in farm country, where it's not. I mean, it's a city, a small city, and once you venture outside of the city, is when you start to get into some of the other rural areas, the townships, the farm areas, which you may or may not know. Ashtabula County is the largest county geographically in the state of Ohio. So there's a lot of green that, in terms of scenery, that is there in the county. But you know what? Good family, mom and dad, two older siblings, sisters. So I had a great life as far as how I was brought up, and in terms of what we did there as a family and how we interacted with other people there in the community. My folks, quite frankly, were considered trailblazers. My father was director of dietetics, and my mother was the head dietitian at the one and only hospital there in Ashtabula, but they were the first Black Americans to venture down that path. So I had some of that folks who knew me, they knew me because they knew my parents, they knew the family, and in terms of what the family represented as far as the community is concerned, and that was a blessing because my folks were very, very well respected. As a matter of fact, the county and the hospital association there awarded them an award as far as being trailblazers for Ashtabula County back in 2010. So it was, a treat for me to be able to go to the program and see them see them get this award. Yeah, so it was cool, man. I really can't, Vince. I really can't complain. Black folks knew white folks knew black folks. Christian folks knew Jewish folks. There weren't a lot of Jews in the community. As a matter of fact, one of my good friends who I grew up with, who's Jewish, saw him Saturday in Concord, and we were talking a little bit about that. But there was very, very small Jewish populace there in Ashtabula, but everybody, for the most part, got along with each other, and it was good.
Okay. Well,
it was good.
I do have some cousins that live in Ashtabula. One of my cousins, her name is Ladine. I don't know if you know Ladine or not.
Ladine Miller?
Yeah, well, is that her name now? Because she had the wedding last August, and unfortunately I didn't make it, but yes.
Yeah, well, it's give me a second. She married the pastor of the church there in Ashtabula. So no, it's not Miller, but she married the pastor of the church at the People's Missionary Baptist Church, and that's who she ended up marrying, which was good. Nice man, good man.
Yes.
And I've known Ladine forever, and she's quite frankly, she's a close friend of the family. So.
Okay, well, glad to hear that. So your Facebook page describes you as a writer, teacher, actor, broadcaster, and a few other things. Obviously, I know you as being involved in broadcasting, but I later found out that you were in the world of education. So do you want to talk about your start in broadcasting and how you ended up being in the classroom?
Yeah, I started, which was, again, kind of interesting. We're having this conversation because that Jewish friend of mine I mentioned to you, we talked a little bit about who was mentors for us, especially when we got into high school. And, one of the things that I was involved in for a long time was music, especially as far as choir was concerned, and enjoyed that very much. And I'm talking going back to elementary school, specifically when I got into the middle school and high school areas, in that scene. So my choir director, old guitar teacher when I was in fourth grade, but my music choir director from middle school through high school, a guy named Bob Allshouse, basically turned me on to music, man, and an appreciation for music. And he taught courses when we were in middle school and high school that kind of focused, especially middle school, that what we would call in college a music appreciation class is where I'm going with this. And I didn't keep up with the guitar lessons, and he used to scold me about that all the time. But what Bob discovered in me was, he said, "Dave, you have a nice voice." And so I continued singing from middle school through high school. And as a matter of fact, went to undergraduate at the University of Cincinnati and was in the College Conservatory of Music there as a broadcasting major and had a minor in theater. But toured with the Men's Glee Club, was a part of that group there at UC for 2 years. And so just really enjoyed that. So did the bachelor's thing at UC, and that's where really, quite frankly, my love for radio kicked in. It started my senior year in high school, and I won this contest called Voice of Democracy. And the Voice of Democracy was, you write a speech, and it was entered for competition. And I was the representative for my high school. And then at the time in Beulah, we had 4 high schools. There was Ashtabula, there was Harbor, there was Edgewood, and St. John. So I represented Ashtabula, and then there were 3 other students that represented the other 3 schools. We went to the local radio station there, which was WREO AM and FM, which was owned by the Raleigh family. The Raleighs owned the 2 stations there in Beulah, and they also owned the only newspaper we had, which was the Star Beacon, which is still there. And those stations are still there, quite frankly, too. The call letters are different now. And I came in, and as we were kind of talking a bit before we went on air here earlier about recording music and information and all that good stuff, and the difference between that and podcasting and everything else, I had an opportunity to go into the production studio, and there was a technician there, an audio technician, and they recorded my speech, and they recorded the other 3 students' speeches as well. Those were broadcast to the community. And I said, you know what, this is kind of cool. And so that's where kind of my love for radio started. And, started doing that my freshman year in college, was working for the campus radios there at Cincinnati, started in the news department, and then ultimately gravitated over into doing sales. But I was working, Vince, professionally in radio when I was like 19 years old. I worked at the stations during the summer, doing public affairs programming, covering city council meetings on Monday night there in Ashtabula, and also worked professionally in radio in Cincinnati at WUBE Radio, which at the time was owned by Danny Kaye, the entertainer and performer, and worked there my sophomore year and also worked there my senior year in sales. So that's where the love for radio came in, was the general manager for my college radio station. And also dabbled as far as public radio was concerned, but with the old WVXU, which at one time was licensed to Xavier University, and spent a summer there working with those folks, and then continued on professionally with the career. After I left Ohio University, got my master's there, so I went right from undergraduate program to an MA program, which at the time was ranked in the top 5 in the country. The radio television program was at Ohio University, but went there. And then once I completed my degree work there, came to Cleveland and started working professionally, man, in sales.
So when you came to Cleveland and you ended up at WERE?
I started actually at WKSW. KISS 100, you may remember that, which is now WGAR FM.
Yes.
So I was there for a year, got blown out, and that's the nature of the beast in broadcast, and got blown out, was bummed out, and then the music director, who I happened to be friends with at the time, had heard what was going on, and I was in the sales office sitting there by myself and packing up my stuff. And he says, I'll never forget this. His name was Bobby McGee. And he said, Dave, come here for a second. And we walked down to the hall to the general manager's office, a guy named David Gerard, who actually hired me. And he said, David got let go too today as well. And so that was really kind of my welcome to broadcast.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, because
the same thing happened to me 3 times out of 4 jobs in radio. They said goodbye. We don't need you anymore.
We don't need you anymore.
That's the nature. That's the nature of the beast. We're going to talk about your time at ERE, and we're going to talk about your transition to other things when we get back. Absolutely fascinating, bruh. We have so many things in common. Who knew? This is Open Door with Vince Robinson on 95.9 FM WOVU. My guest is teacher, writer, actor, broadcaster, and a few other things, David Moody. We'll be right back right here on Burton Belcar Community Radio, 95.9 FM WOVU.
This is DJ Chris Dowles, programs and music director here at WOVU 95.9 FM. Our voices united, a Burton Bell Car community radio station. WOVU 95.9 FM sends a big big thank you to the entire staff of the St. Luke's Foundation and President and CEO Timothy Tramble for awarding WOVU 95.9 FM $25,000 to purchase the WOVU 95.9 FM mobile vehicle. On behalf of our entire team, our Executive Director, Joy Johnson, and Executive Board, we said thank you, St. Luke's Foundation, for continuing addressing social determinants of health for our people in our neighborhoods and throughout Cuyahoga County. Thank you. This message is being brought to you by WOVU 95.9 FM, Our Voices United, a Burton Bell Carr community radio station.
We're back on Open Door with Vince Robinson and the conversation with my guest, David Moody, who was working at a radio station. He had been there for a year and they said, "Oh, bro, you got to go." But he lucked up and someone who hired him offered him another opportunity. Is that how it went?
Yes, pretty much kind of how it went, Vince. I had some friends one friend in particular, who the apartment I was living in at the in Lakewood, I lived up on top of I was on top of Kathy Guzik, and she lived down below me, and she was a quick story about Kathy. Kathy ended up marrying a guy named Tom Wilson, who owned several radio stations. Speaking of buying stations, who owned several radio stations in Cleveland. But Kathy and I were buddies from Cincinnati and close friends, and which is how I found my apartment. Because she said, "Hey, Dave, there's an opening in my building. You need to come check it out." So I did, and the rest is history as far as that was concerned. But she knew what had happened. She goes, "Why don't you check over at ERE? I understand they're looking for people." And the sales manager there is a guy named Bill Snow. So I said, okay. So I called, because I had been looking and had some interviews. And I called Bill. And Bill said, "Yeah, why don't you come on in?" And again, I had some references, Kathy being one of them. But a client that I had that was working at the old Revco, which is now CBS at the time, Candy Lomler. Candy spoke highly of me. And so Bill said, "Hey, you got some people, they speak good about you. When can you start?" So I ended up taking the position there at ERE. Here's a great story about Bill. Living in Mentor, still do. Well, come to find out that, because I didn't know Bill, Bill lived in Mentor too. So talking about people having things in common. So I worked for Bill. When I jumped the fence and got into television, Bill ended up working for me. I was his boss at Channel 19. But went over to ERE in 1983, man, and stayed there, quite frankly. Loved working for Kim Colebrook, and quite frankly, enjoyed working with all of us who owned the station. But left in August of 86 and went over to a station called WOIO-TV, Channel 19, which I had known about before it went on the air because a friend of mine and mentor that I met when I was in graduate school at OU, a man named Hubert Payne, who was working for WKYC-TV in Cleveland at the time, which was owned by NBC, had told me about a project he was working on. He was going to sign on an independent television station called Channel 19. So 19 had reached out to me before they signed on in 85, and I wanted to stay at ERE. Yeah, I was making, back in those days, man, $35,000 a year. That was a lot of money. And, just got married, had a family. And so I stayed there another year. And I left ERE though in 86 and joined the staff over at 19 in August of 1986.
Yeah, 86 was the year that it ended for me too, because the Oliver sold the station to Metropolis Broadcasting out of Detroit, and that was that.
Yeah, no, you're right, and that's another reason why I wanted to get out of there. Because I knew the stations, and I know what happens when stations are sold. because things happen, people leave, transitions, they start cutting folks, they start bringing their own people in, and I talked to the people at 19 again, Dave Smith and Dennis Thatcher, and Dennis is a very, very, very close friend of mine. And, they said, well, we didn't get you the first time, but we'd love to have you over here now. And so I made the move and was really happy that I did.
Yeah. So you worked sales there at WOIO, and then what?
Well, I started again at OIO in 1990. Dennis promoted me to be a local sales manager in Cleveland. And for your audience, if you don't know what that is, what that means, basically I had a staff of about 10 people, including some sales assistants that reported to me. But we were responsible for all the local advertising revenue, the local revenue, sales revenue for the television station. So in terms of structure, you have a national sales manager, and that's the person that's on the road, going to New York, going to LA, going to Chicago, doing all the national business. But then you have the local staff, those people who are out there locally, working with the McDonald's and the Subways and some of your mom and pop retailers, doing deals. So I was over all that. As a matter of fact, we ended up generating, when I was there, I was handling about $10 million a year in revenue there for the station. But part of the reason why I'm sharing this with you is that I became the second black LSM, local sales manager ever, history-wise, in television in Cleveland. Take a guess who was the first.
I have no idea, but Hubert Payne is what came to mind, but it's not.
There's a man named Hubert Payne that, yes, will come to mind. Hubert Payne was the first.
Okay. I guess I was a lucky guess then.
Well, because of what he was doing for WKYC before he left the project for Channel 19. So Payne was the first, and then I was the second, ironically. Mm-hmm. So some history was made. Here, if you allow me, Vince, because this is maybe kind of a frustrating point for me. If you allow me just to kind of go off the beaten path here, just for a quick second.
Okay.
Since I left in sales management in TV in Cleveland, now keep in mind that was in the 90s. I stopped 1999 was when I finished up. So I had a 13-year run in sales at OIO and UAB, and most of which was in management. There has probably only been, when you look at it from a general manager standpoint, NSM, remember I said NSM was national sales manager, LSM local sales manager. There's only been five people who have done that job in the history of television in Cleveland. And the last person who was in town, there were two actually. One brother is in North Carolina. Cedric is in North Carolina. But the other brother you may know is a man named Rick Harris.
Yes.
And Rick is president and general manager for the NBC owned and operated television station in Philadelphia. And he's also over the Telemundo operation that NBC Universal runs. So that's been it. There was only a hand. Literally, you could probably count on one hand the number of us that have served in that capacity, in that function, in the history of television in Cleveland. And I think that's so sad.
We can take another departure from the beaten path, so to speak, because I'm interested in your perspective on how radio and television have changed in light of the fact that there's so much competition. You've got all these cable channels. Now you've got all these streaming channels. You know, back in the day when we were in radio, there was no satellite radio. Now people get in their cars and They don't listen to AM or FM. They listen to satellite, or they're streaming something.
Listening to their phone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, something coming from the phone. They're listening to Apple Music, which I do a lot.
Yeah.
And I listen to a lot of satellite. I guess, to your question, kind of the state of localism, local radio, what is that? And, moving forward, what will it be? I think competitively, what you have to, what you find owners dealing with, market by market, obviously, is how do I make some sense of digital? Okay. How do I make some sense in terms of, especially from a revenue standpoint, how can I use it to my advantage? And I think it's taken broadcasters a while, quite frankly, to make some sense of that on both sides of the fence, on the radio side, but as well as television is concerned. And I'm really, speaking from a sales perspective, but even in terms of programming, how do I use digital? How do I make myself, more, or make the public more aware of me as a content provider versus when I didn't have access to using digital, we were before. You and I talked about that again before we went on air in terms of, the show itself, how you produce it, how it's distributed, quite frankly, how it gets uploaded within the system. So those are all things I think broadcasters have tried to make some sense of moving forward, because at the end of the day, they're trying to generate some revenue. So, what can I do that makes some sense so the revenue picture looks even better for us as a corporation?
Yeah, and I would also have to wonder what the impact of the competition would be on sales revenue.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I think one has to understand what it is that they're selling. And I think that's been somewhat problematic for stations, because I don't think they really understood how to market and use digital to their advantage. Obviously, they're much better now, okay? Before it was websites and, we connect with that somehow as far as the station is concerned, and you tell your advertiser that, we'll give you a banner ad on our website besides, the spots that you're buying on the station. But now we're getting into, things like geo-fencing and all that kind of stuff. And it can be part of it's a media mix, and it can be part of the buy. And, I'm just not adding on the digital as some sort of, something extra or some kind of freebie that I'm giving to you because you made a spot buy with me. But in some cases, quite frankly, as an advertiser, I might not want to even want the on-air spots. I just want to do something as far as the website is concerned, or whatever else you got going on from a digital perspective, that could make some sense for me in terms of trying to move inventory, move products. So.
Well, it can be safely said that a lot has changed since the time we were visiting those stations. But I want to talk about your pivot into the world of education, so we'll do that when we return. This is Open Door with Vince Robinson on 95.9 FM WOVU, Burton Belcar Community Radio. My guest is David Moody. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Tammy Payton, the CEO and founder of Pillars to Success Incorporated. You are listening to 95.9 FM WOVU, Our Voices United, Burton Belcar Community Radio.
Welcome back to Open Door and the conversation with teacher, writer, actor, broadcaster, and a few other things, Mr. David L. Moody. You spent several years, more than a decade, I think you said 13 years at WOIO Television, WUAB, and then you made a career turn. Talk to us about how that happened and what happened.
Yeah, after I got this time I got downsized, so it wasn't really a straight out fired, but but I got downsized out of my gig because of ownership change. Raycom came in, Milt Malt sold OIO and UAB, and that was kind of a pain in everybody's behind. Well, not everybody, but certain people's behind at the station anyway. So they were glad to see me go. It's what happens when you're a little bit vocal about things, and so I left, and I started my own business, consulting business, media buying and consulting, and did pretty well with it for a few years. One of the things that I got involved in was political. And a good friend of mine named Raymond Pierce ran for mayor of Cleveland. And now we're going back to 2001. And I ended up handling Raymond's, doing his campaign for him from the media side, which was a treat. Got to work with people such as Arnold Pinckney. And Arnold and I, toward the end, when Raymond ended up going into the general election against Jane Campbell, which you may, Vince, probably remember that.
I do.
Yeah, because we were we were kind of caught a lot of people off guard and by surprise. But we ran a very good campaign. And so I did that. And we got beat. Jane beat us. She outspent us. I think we ended up spending about $275,000 in the market. Jane spent three quarters of $250,000, about $750,000-800,000. So she outspent us, and that hurt us. But I did that for a while, and I started teaching part-time. And I knew that I wanted to, at some point, teach, which is why I went from undergrad to a graduate program and got my master's, because I knew I would need a master's in order to teach in higher ed. So I started, so I was doing my own thing with my business, man, and but started teaching, was an adjunct at some schools like Notre Dame College, which just closed their doors, sad to say, a couple of weeks ago. Such a fine institution. But quite frankly, Notre Dame gave me my first opportunity to teach in a 4-year institution, and was also working part-time at Lakeland Community College, which is quite frankly struggling now too as well. But I did that and liked it, and took a job at Bowling Green State University in 2004 as an instructor, and decided to go back and get my PhD, which is what I did, and I finished that in 2010. I started it in 2005, but that was the path to higher ed. So I was at BG for 6 years, left Bowling Green, took a job and was working in upstate New York at SUNY Oswego. Did that for 7 years. And then Lake Erie College, I was doing some volunteer work for Lake Erie College at the time. And Lake Erie College said, "Hey, you tired of riding the train back and forth to Syracuse, Dave?" I said, "Yep." So there was an opportunity there at the college. Wasn't paying a lot of money, but again, another door was open for me. So I took it, joined them, was doing administrative work, was teaching, and quite frankly, was recently awarded tenure there, and became the first African-American that they've ever awarded tenure to there at the institution.
At Lake Erie College?
At Lake Erie College.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And the school is over 150 years old.
So you're kind of following in the footsteps of those trailblazers that you mentioned earlier in our conversation.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yes. So now you are completely immersed in the world of education. Are you at any point missing broadcasting?
I do. But it's kind of cool because the nature of, when I look at the curriculum and how it's structured there, not only at Lake Erie, but when I was at Oswego and even at Bowling Green, the nature of what I teach as far as the majors that I'm involved with is concerned, I'm still able to kind of dabble in the world of broadcast. And probably the biggest kick that I get out of it is the students that I have worked with that end up graduating and are now working professionally that I've been able to teach and mentor, and to look at their careers and how they blossom. That blows me away. I mean, I have one student in Phoenix, which is DMA-wise, which DMA means designated market area, top 12 market. She's doing well. She was working for Fox there. They owned and operated station. Now she's working for the Scripps Howard television station there, which is an ABC affiliate in Phoenix. Marissa is she's killing it. I have another student that worked with me that worked for Cox for a while, Bowling Green. She is now doing her own thing, consulting in New York City. Got another student who is in upper management now and kind of got in on the ground floor with NBC Universal as far as Peacock is concerned. And Jason is heading up from a technical side, one of their departments there in New York. So in all three of these students just spoke to my mass media class this past spring semester at Lake Erie College. I brought them in via Zoom. So there's that side of it, that, my hand is still somewhat in the cookie jar. And if nothing else, it's through the students that I've been able to mentor and work with. And I keep abreast in terms of what the heck is going on, man. And so the missing part of me actually working in the industry somewhat is satisfied, because I'm kind of still working in the industry by working through them, if that makes sense.
So what classes are you teaching then?
Yeah, I teach, and I say again because I just mentioned the mass media class. I teach public speaking. I teach classes in interpersonal and communication, intercultural communication. I teach a senior seminar, which is a capstone course for the students. My program is small at Lake Erie, so I wear a lot of different hats. I may be teaching a class in public relations at some point. I may be teaching a class in rhetorical criticism. I teach a class in communication theory. So it's all of that. Okay. So I wear a lot of different hats in terms of what I teach. When I was at Oswego, it was more specific to broadcasts and mass media. And that's what I was teaching. And Bowling Green was similar to that too as well, even though I did dabble a little bit, because my PhD is in American cultural studies. So that's my work. Scholarship is in cultural studies. So I dabble a lot in those types of courses when I have the opportunity to, as well as at Lake Erie, I teach graduate courses, which come out of the graduate business school.
Well, it's time for you to educate me, because I have to be transparent and honest with you. I have not heard of the category American Cultural Studies. What does that encompass?
Okay, it's probably if you were talking to someone at the House level or the Senate level in particular, especially on the right side, they may say it's a woke program. So cultural studies is inclusive of just a little bit of everything. Not only American culture, but we look at other cultures. But it really does focus on the issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I could be looking at something pertaining to Black popular culture, which is my scholarship area. But I could also be looking at something that focuses on queer studies. So we can go, right down the line there with some different perspectives on different topics, different subject matter that one could dabble with as far as cultural studies is concerned. So to give me an example, I could take a class in cultural studies and one day be reading something from Foucault, and in the same class also be reading something from James Baldwin. Looking at culture through several different lenses, I guess, is kind of the best way to sum that up.
Okay. So you could look at a subculture like hip hop.
Yeah, well, hip hop. It's funny you mentioned that because my first book that came out in 2012, I guess we'll segue into that, focused on hip hop, but specifically black gospel. I mean, black Christian hip hop. Excuse me, black Christian hip hop and rap. But hip hop is the culture, and rap, quite frankly, is the subculture. I mean, rap comes out. I mean, hip hop is inclusive of not only the music, but the attire that you wear, graffiti art, et cetera, dancing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, the b-boy, b-girl phenomenon.
All of that. All of that.
Yeah,
all of that.
Okay.
But yes. Quite frankly, that all is under that umbrella of American culture studies. One of the things that I'm very involved in is popular culture and black popular culture, which comes out of that. And quite frankly, the Popular Culture Association, which I'm a member of, and was, I got to throw out some more history to you, where I was recently, my term was up, but I was the first black board chair for the Black Popular Culture Association. I mean, not Black Popular Culture Association, but Popular Culture Association, excuse me. The gentleman who started PCA is a gentleman by the name of Ray Brown, and often is credited for coining the phrase popular culture. But Ray was a faculty member at Bowling Green State University.
Not to be confused with the bassist Ray Brown.
No. No.
Yeah, I got you. Interesting. Popular Culture Association. I'm learning so much today, man.
Well, and then there's the American Culture Association, which is where American culture comes out of that. So the two work together, quite frankly.
Yeah.
The two associations.
Well, I also have to express condolences to you because, being aware of popular culture and American culture means that you're plugged in. You probably watch the news all the time. Yeah.
And you know what kind of too, Vince, where I became kind of a news junkie, you know where I got that from?
Who's that?
It was when I worked at ERE.
Okay. Okay. Well, it's ironic.
And it hasn't left my system.
Okay. Well, it's ironic for me because I'm a former news reporter and I don't watch the news anymore, but I have personal reasons for that.
Well, and that makes some sense because you were on the front line with it as a journalist and as a reporter.
Yes.
Where I was looking at it and coming at it from a different perspective. But that was, I was, when I at first I tell people where I worked when going back to radio now, and they look at me, what, you don't work for WMMS or WZAK? No, I work for an all news talk station.
Right.
And I'm into that. And, and I to this day, I got to tell you, some of my best, in terms of memories, but, I'm thinking about, when, I used to tell people these are the voices that I get to work with every day. The Vince Robinsons of the world, the Bob Tayaks and the Steve Fullertons, or Bob Fuller as we called them. The Greg Brendas of the world, the Larry Morrills, the Vivian Goodmans, Morton Downey Jr.'s, man. We had it going on.
You're bringing up some memories, man. Those are some names I haven't heard for a long time.
Wait. Jim McIntyre.
The Mac
Attack.
Right.
Man. We had some of the best on-air people in the city of Cleveland in radio.
Mary Roker.
Said we're all. Yep,
Yeah.
Exactly. They were all in one building. Building.
It's amazing. It's amazing. We're going to take another pivot when we get back, Dave, and I'm excited to talk to you about your time as an actor. This is Open Door with Vince Robinson on 95.9 FM WOVU, Burton Bell Car Community Radio. Be right back.
This is DJ Chris Dowles, Programs and Music Director here at WOVU 95.9 FM. Our Voices United, a Burton Bell Car Community Radio Station. WOVU 95.9 FM sends a big thank you to the entire staff of the St. Luke's Foundation and President and CEO Timothy Tramble for awarding WOVU 95.9 FM $25,000 to purchase the WOVU 95.9 FM mobile vehicle. On behalf of our entire team, our Executive Director, Joy Johnson, and Executive Board, we said thank you, St. Luke's Foundation, for continuing addressing social determinants of health for our people in our neighborhoods and throughout Cuyahoga County. Thank you. This message is being brought to you by WOVU 95.9 FM, Our Voices United, a Burton Bell Carr community radio station.
We're back for the final chapter of Open Door with Vince Robinson and the conversation with Dave Moody, who just talked about his time in broadcasting, how that came to an end, and he shifted gears and he went into education. He's teaching American culture, popular culture, all these good things. And in the midst of all of this, he is also a person who can memorize hundreds and hundreds of words and stand on the stage in front of people and pretend that he's somebody that he isn't. Talk to us about your time as an actor and someone involved in theater, Dave.
Yeah, and let me, before I jump into that, let me give two plugs, if you don't mind. This is going back to the academic, but still will segue back in the question you just asked me. Mm-hmm. Two books that have been published that I've written, the first of which, Political Melodies in the Pews, The Voice of the Black Christian Rapper in the 21st Century Church. That came out in 2012. And then the second book is titled The Complexity and Progression of Black Representation in Film and Television, which came out in 2016. Both are Rowman and Littlefield are the publisher, Lexington Books, which is a subsidiary of Rowman and Littlefield. So go to Amazon, or you can go to the Rowman and Littlefield to their website and pick up a copy. All right. I got that in.
Well, no, I mean, we can talk about that too, because I do recall knowing or finding out that you were also a published author, and we could probably do a whole show on the two books that you just mentioned alone. But please tell us how you became an author. Well,
this came from the PhD and the dissertation. And that's where the first book was basically was my dissertation. I had to tweak it. I tweaked it to a point where it would make sense for a general audience, a public, to read, and it wasn't heavy into academics. But that's where the first book came from, and has done quite well. I was, before COVID kicked in March of 2020. I was the last speaker that the Social Justice Institute at Case Western Reserve had as a speaker. They had given me a fellow to come in and talk about that book. The second book, when it came out in 2016, quite frankly, Vince, is just a bunch of essays, articles I had written that looked closely at the representation, and this speaks now to my to my acting and my days in television, but look closely in terms of how minorities were being, specifically African Americans, were being depicted in film and TV, and so that's where that the research for that book came from. So. And I have a third project that I'm working on now. I'm under contract with Wayne State University Press, working on a edited piece that focuses on new perspectives in Black popular culture, and hoping to have that finished and wrapped up before the year is out. So
okay,
yeah.
Well, I know it's a tedious process, and I'm sure you're looking forward to the conclusion of the writing process. Yes. I'm looking at the title of your book, The Complexity and Progression of Black Representation in Film and Television, and just remembering the last class that I took in the Department of Journalism at Kent State University. I did a presentation or a paper or whatever to the class, and it was the last class of the last quarter of school that year, and the folks stayed past the bell ringing. But I was talking to them about images in Black primetime television and telling these folks, many of whom had never encountered black people outside of being at the university or seeing them on television, that what they were seeing on television was not us in our entirety. It was, we had the Jeffersons. Who else? We had Good Times.
Good Times,
just
man.
a few shows on, but my point to them
Sanford
was
and Son.
Sanford and Son. This is not us. This is just something that you're seeing on television. I can't even imagine where you would have gone in 30 years, 25 years since that time, and so much had changed. I mean, when we were growing up, Dave, it was something different to see a black person on the screen.
Yes.
We watched the Ed Sullivan Show, and the Jackson 5 would be on, or James Brown would be on, and, it was like, wow, black people on TV. We didn't get regular exposure to us on television, and then they came out with these sitcoms, but they still did not reflect us because we're not monolithic as a people. No,
and that's part of the story that's told in the various chapters in the book, and the complexity and progression text that came out in 2016. But I look at filmmakers such as Oscar Micheaux, and we talk about some of the negativity and how blacks are being depicted, particularly with D.W. Griffith's 1915 film Birth of a Nation, and all the problems that it created as far as image was concerned. Many would argue, scholars would argue, that the construct of the mammy, at least as far as film was concerned, was made its first appearance in Griffith's film. It had existed before that on stage, but as far as film was concerned, we saw it. And quite frankly, it was a white male that was dressed in drag, with blackface. So you had all of that, and the damage that was done from a film such as that is still historically is the longest running silent movie ever in the history of cinema. So you had all of that you had to deal with. So the text though talks and looks at, from a different perspective, some of, how those images were constructed, came about, the depictions that were laid in, and I work into other areas though, as far as work that's done by Baraka with Dutchman, and I continue on. Speaking of sitcom, I continue on toward the end of the book. And look at situation comedies. I look at the Boondocks and things of that nature as well, in terms of representation and what that means, moving forward, today. So there's a combination of, there's a chapter that was co-authored with my close friend, Dr. Rob Obie, who's at Bowling Green State University. And we were looking at the Scarface effect and what it had on specifically black youth. We talk about that, and it's got a mix of some narratives pertaining to the hip hop culture. So there's a little bit of everything in there as far as image is concerned, depiction, but what it all means, and moving forward, what does it mean now? It means now. So a fun project, actually, quite frankly, and it was a fun book to write, but again, that lends itself to my work in Black popular culture. But by the way, I was just accepted to and invited to come speak at and I didn't mention this to you earlier when we were talking about academics, but the European Popular Culture Association has invited me to come speak in July at their annual conference over the 4th of July. And what I'll be presenting is some work on the story. It's a film titled The Story of a 3-Day Pass, which was done in France, 1967. But it's a piece that's done by Melvin Van Peebles. Mm-hmm. So It's a wonderful film. So if I can get the money together, I'll be talking to the Europeans about that.
Okay. Sounds interesting.
About that. The acting, I've been acting, Vince, since I was going back to college. And the love for theater actually probably started my senior year in high school. But I started to pursue that when I got to Cincinnati and, started doing stage work. Had minored in theater. But was working professionally in theater my last year there at Cincinnati. Was freelancing and doing work for AT&T and some other companies. I had a wonderful professor who, Dr. Mogetz, she took me under her wing and mentored me and liked me and my work so much. She said, you know what? You need an agent, use mine. And so I ended up using her agent. And Mo is she and her husband, Jack Rouse, are very, very involved in the theater community. They recently gave the Cincinnati Playhouse $6 million to build a new facility. So that's how involved they are. And her husband, Jack, is known for his work as far as theme parks. As a matter of fact, the Underground Railroad Museum in Cincinnati, if you're familiar with that, he built that. So these are folks, and he used to be the director of live shows at Kings Island many, many moons ago. So I was fortunate. I had those type of people, professors at the undergraduate level, that took an interest in me, in my work, and kind of helped guide my career. So since I, been back in Cleveland, and I stopped acting for a while, but picked it up. The bug hit me again back in the early 2000s when I left Channel 19, and I started performing again professionally. And had been blessed, man, to be able to work at the Cleveland Playhouse. I do a lot of work, though, with a theater in the Gordon Square area called Blank Canvas Theater. My friend and the gentleman who's the artistic director there, Patrick Siamaco, Pat and I worked together at Weathervane Playhouse back in 2007 when we did the Full Monty together. And he was a young guy in his 20s, and I'm an old fart in my 40s. And but we got to be close. I've got to be friends. And, I've done a few shows with him, going back to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest in 2014, Glengarry Glen Ross in 2016. One Man, Two Governors. I did that fall of 2022, and most recently performed the role of Crooks in Of Mice and Men. Around this time last year, we were finishing up the run at Blank Canvas. It's a small venue. Theater seats about 110 people. Professional theater, though, man, and he works with some of the best here in Cleveland, and that's where I spend probably the bulk of my time. I think you probably read where I posted I had auditioned for Jitney, and I was kind of bummed that I didn't. I got called back, so I was happy about that. Jimmy called me back, but I didn't get cast, and I think some of the roles were pre-cast anyway.
Mm-hmm. Which role were you interested in?
God, I was interested in what role was I interested in? There were two roles actually. I was interested in. You caught me off guard because my mind's blank right now.
I just happened to have seen the play, so I was just wondering which one of those people would have been you had you been chosen for the role.
Here, I'll tell you. Give me 1 second. I'll tell you quickly because I'm drawing the blank here. I will tell you real quickly. Give me 1 second.
Yes, because our time is getting away from us.
Yeah.
We'll leave.
It wasn't Becker.
Okay.
It was Fillmore.
Okay.
Fillmore was who I wanted to do.
Okay. It was a great play, man. I'm sure you would have added something to it because there were a lot of folks on the stage that I didn't know, but it was masterfully directed and well acted and everything. But
yeah, Jimmy did a great job,
yeah.
And he's and that's one reason why I wanted to do the show.
Yeah.
because I wanted the opportunity to work with Jimmy. So
Okay. Well, I want to take this time to congratulate you on all the things that you have accomplished. Now, I have to call you doctor, or maybe you're one of those people who don't mind if people forget. But congratulations to you on all the things that you have accomplished. Looking forward to the release of the next book project, and you got a place to come back and talk about it if you like. David Moody, thanks for joining me on Open Door.
sounds good. You can call me Fillmore since I forgot his name. So.
Okay. All right, Fillmore. All right. Thanks again, my brother, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Vince. All the best.
All right. And to those who are listening, as always, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself. Make today your best day. Peace.